Olá, muito bom dia.
Good morning and welcome everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to SB COP event, Strategic Solutions during the São Paulo Climate Week here at CNI, National Confederation of Industry here in São Paulo. Our main goals are to reflect on the net zero and the ways, the paths to net zero cooperation, international cooperation, policy, and industry to present the deliverables of COP30 and talk about the strategy axis of the working groups. Key topics of climate transition and economic transition to position COP as the event that marks the convergence between the private sector, governments, investors, and multilateral agencies that is going to be hosted by CNI, reinforcing the relevance of the industry as a agent of transformation in climate and also the world global system, economic system. We are going to hear from Dan Yoshpi, high-level climate champion, Ricardo Mussa, chair for SB COP, superintendent for CNI Environment and Sustainability, Davi Bontempo, and executive director of ICC Brazil, Gabriela Doriac. And now, to welcome all of you, we would like to invite Superintendent of the Environment and Sustainability for CNI, Davi Bontempo. Good morning, everyone. It is a pleasure to have you here at CNI. It's always a great satisfaction to host events such as this for the productive segment, the productive industry in the Environment Week here in São Paulo. The contributions for net zero, low carbon, and we have been working on the cases. The private sector is going to be showing the implementation agenda that is going to be presented at COP. I would like to greet Dan Yoshpi, our champion, also Ricardo Mussa and Gabriela, all players who have contributed a great deal to our journey. And more specifically, I would like to tell you a little bit about CNI. On behalf of our president, I'd like to thank everyone for being here, and I would like to make ourselves available to talk about a transition for a low carbon economy. We work in 4 pillars. We talk a lot about net zero and decreasing carbon. We have been looking at the regulations. We talk about energy transition. That's something that's being greatly discussed in this climate week. And that's also one of the main pillars at COP. We talk about circular economy, something that CNI started in 2019 with the ISO standard drafting. We are contributing to the bill of law that's still running in Congress, but that's something that we have been working with the federal government. The federal government has been working with regulations, creating the National Circular Economy Forum and the National Plan for Circular Economy. These are forums and work groups that CNI has been working with. Forest conservancy also is something very important to us. How can we keep the forest standing, and how can we create jobs looking at those industries that we are looking at, like food production, pharma, cosmetics, and many other industries that use the benefits of this type type of economy. CNI is then at your disposal. I hope we have a great discussion this morning, particularly looking at SBCOP. Musa is going to talk about this initiative, engagement, and mobilization of the corporate segment. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Davi. And now we are going to hear from Gabriela Doriaki, Executive Director for ICC Brazil.
Obrigado. Bom dia.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I was just telling you that the feeling is that COP has already kick-started. So this year, we are going to be very lucky to host it at the city of Belém. We have a very engaged and forward-acting segment and industry. We are cooperating. We are very active, and that's something that I said yesterday. I am very proud to see how in other countries the corporate segment has taken a step back and avoided to position themselves as leaders in climate change. But here in Brazil, companies are more and more present. They are acting, they are looking for new solutions and trying to make Brazil a low carbon economy that is going to be a leader in that segment. At SBCOP, I would like to congratulate Davi Bontempo, Dan as a high-level champion, and others, because we are congregating the strengths of the private sector to think structurally and how these environmental solutions are going to help us progress, both what we are discussing at COP and other agendas that are complementary and additional. Something that makes me a little frustrated about COP, the private sector and the formal dialogues during negotiations, it's not always considered a legitimate party to these discussions. And ICC, since its inception, from the first COP meeting, has pointed at the private sector as one of the main solutions for the challenges we are now facing around the world. If we are not able to bring them in, things are going to be a lot more complicated. So something else that Davi has said, working with CNI, this carbon agenda is a big differential for Brazil. We are going to have our fourth meeting at ICC, our fourth event, showing that we can be a leader in carbon credits. We could be supplying at least half of this carbon credits, the voluntary carbon credits, and Brazil has the opportunity of establishing a very advanced system with integrity and credibility for carbon credits, and that is extremely important. It's going to be a mechanism for deep change in the production logic that drives Brazil. And we are going to be launching this today. What we are talking about is bioeconomy. When we talk about nature-based solutions, it is very clear that Brazil will lead because of the biodiversity. And how can we make this biodiversity an asset, not only for social and economic development, but particularly on the social aspect? How can we develop that in areas that require that? That's very important for bioeconomy, but it's not only about extractivism. How can we add value to bioeconomy? And Brazil, once again, has major potential, but in order to enjoy that, we will need to invest, we will need to embrace, and we'll need to have the right incentives in order to unlock this potential. There is an agenda that as private sector, we still need to make work. I know one of the pillars of SBCOP talks about that, which is adaptation. If we look at financial resources that have been earmarked for mitigation, that's around 1.3 trillion. If we look at what has been dedicated or earmarked to adaptation, we are talking about 76 billion. So I know Anthony has talked about that. So collectively with the private sector is also important for us to think about that. And this is even more amazing when we think about this 1.3 trillion that is earmarked for mitigation. The private sector is responsible for at least half of that. And when we talk about adaptation, only 8%. So there is lots of room for the private sector to invest more. And one last point that we have been making is the responsibility of the private sector for the PMSs. So when we talk about multi national corporations, is that it's a huge system that needs to be engaged and included in the debates and the agenda. When we look at funding in terms of the trillions that are available for green funding, only 2.8 PMS were able to access these resources. So that is food for thought. How can we engage all of our chain, and how can we create favorable conditions so that the PMS can engage in all of this? This is a topic that we need to reflect upon. I know Schneider has been leading in terms of skilling and training, and that's a very important agenda that will allow us to have a conversation around this topic. So congratulations, Davi Musa and Dan. We have a lot of work to do till November, but I think in an event such as this, that's when we can see the good practices, the work that's being done, and through our provocations, we can unlock this agenda in a heftier way. Thank you. We now will give it to Ricardo Mussa, Chair of SBCOP. You have the floor. Thank you, Dan. Thank you for being here. Dan invited me to play this role here. He didn't know he was going to be the champion. He was being invited to be the chair. He said, I'm not going to get involved. I want to have some peace. So he pushed it towards me. But then they called and we recommended Dan to take that over as champion. So I was proud to hear Gabriela talk because when I started this journey, I can no longer say that I am a junior in all of this. So, it's a lot of acronyms, but it's a very fun world. I'm very proud to tell you about what we have been doing. This is a journey for SBCOP that started copying what B20 did for G20. I was part of 4 G20s, and given your merits, we weren't able to focus on a lot of aspects before, and we were very successful concentrating on what B20 was presenting to G20. And it was based on this success that the idea came to create this event of SBCOP. Ricardo Alban and others thought about that and how successful we could be. And we copied the structure of B20 that was working with the consultancies and other agencies. And one of the advantages that I've realized we have had over time is that currently our council is comprised of 60 countries that are similar to CNI. We have people from the US, China, Egypt, Nigeria that are just incoming. So all of those are prepared to deal with governments and administrations. They have their own design to cooperate with this government to do the articulation that's necessary. So that gives you the power to make things happen. And I started to get really excited when I realized that 100% of our invitations for other akin agencies around the world to participate in SBCOP, and they accepted. That was wonderful. We now have a board on SBCOP, 35 million of companies that are represented by SBCOP together with NFCCC. So we have a lot of credibility, and we are creating a space where we can be heard and hear each other. We are talking about the 8 topics, the 8 themes that we are going to be discussing. And as we presented in B20, we have recommendations for negotiators. At G20, the models for discussions are different from the models that we use at COP. At COP, it's harder to negotiate. It's 197 countries. It needs to reach a consensus. So it's very difficult to influence this negotiation. So we started SBCOP thinking about drafting a document that could somehow influence these negotiations. And we thought that the best way to help was perhaps not only through a document. We were thinking that, it's hard to write papers that are just reserved for academia. We needed something different. When we thought about the COP meetings, and this is the 30th edition, and please try to filter down what I'm going to say, to water down what I'm going to say, because I try to stress some points. The governments call on the private sector, and we launch new projects during COP meetings. Since the first COP, it has been 600 projects and new initiatives that were launched, many of which didn't have financial returns and died along the way. But rather than launching the 600 initiatives, since we have 35 million companies in our database, there's a lot of good things happening around the world, a lot of things that we could use bottom up rather than thinking about an academic project for 2050. Let's try and understand what's already being done in the private sector. There's a bioeconomy project in Malaysia. We need to look at why is it working? Is it because of the framework? Is it because of the market? Let's try to go and look at more in depth about what is working, what is happening. So we have the SBCOP Awards, which is a contest that will welcome projects from around the world which are already working, which have a financial yield, and that have escalated this climate issues. 700 projects are currently being screened. 700 projects that make sense. And during the COP meeting, we are going to be presenting those with the help of consultancies, McKinsey, BCG, Systemi, Accenture, and IPWC. We are going to be taking all of these projects to the COP30 meeting. We want to influence the government segment with the private segment initiatives. And what started as an idea at CNI has grown in scale. We are growing every day. New associations are joining SBCOP every day. We are a major vehicle for representation of the private sector. And that doesn't belong to Brazil. If it happens that COP is in Turkey or in Australia next year, they are going to take the baton, and they are going to continue that. They are going to continue this model, representing the private sector. Through this model, we are going to make a difference. And in terms of logistics, I have always worked in the private sector, and throughout my professional life, whenever someone came to talk to me, I always had, employees that were about the solution and some that were about the problem. And we have to be those employees that are on the side of the solutions. We know there is a lot of caveats about this COP, but we have to try and make it work. So rather than talking about the issues, let's talk about the solutions. Let's talk about, fighting climate change and fighting, climate issues. We are coming together to discuss the important topics. We need to make this a great meeting, a great success. Thank you for your support to CNI. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Musa. We will now hear from the high-level climate champion of COP30, Dan Yoshpi. Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. I would like to deeply thank CNI SB COP for the invitation to be here with you today. My colleagues have said most of what I wanted to say, so I think we could go back to our coffee break. No, I'm just kidding. I think the message is clear, though. At COP30, we do see the need, and I think the whole world sees the need for the implementation of solutions. Negotiations are very important and they're welcome, but the fact is that negotiators have done a lot in the past few years. They have delivered a considerable package of different paths and guidelines, and the Paris Agreement is a great example, and it's 10 years old. And the geopolitical conditions are ever changing, and right now we are seeing a scenario that will not likely be the most favorable when it comes to great innovations in terms of negotiation. COPs are pretty much made of negotiations and the climate action agenda. For COP30, the agenda of climate action is 1,000,000 miles an hour, as you will be able to see here today, but I don't think negotiations will go 1,000,000 miles per hour. So it's up to us, those of us that are here and those of us that are about implementation and action, to really use this opportunity and then turn COP30 into this acceleration ramp where we can really go into climate action and make that last for the foreseeable future. Of course, COP30 for us is a great landmark as Brazilian citizens, but it is a yearly event. It is a well thought out event of climate agendas. We've had this in London, in Panama. We will have meetings in Rio de Janeiro, Baku, Addis Ababa, in New York, and then we'll culminate everything in Belém this year. So, as we've mentioned, things cannot be fixed in 2 weeks, but throughout the years, this cycle will help us materialize and advance when it comes to essential topics. I don't have to remind you how relevant this theme is. That's why Musa's here. Every colleague from SBCOP and CNI and myself included, we know that this is a very relevant theme, the most relevant theme for our generation, for the next generations. We need to know if we will be able to bring sustainability into the socioeconomic process. If we can't do it as much as we need to do it, I'm sure we all agree that social economic development will go off the tracks. And that's why we're here. That's why our companies, regardless of country origin and political scenario, will need to accelerate that agenda more and more. Working in sustainability, if you all go back to your companies and you see that you have a project that's not development, that's not sustainable, that's something that merits attention. And I believe we all agree on that. That's what brings us together. That's what makes us work, not with a romantic point of view, and not only with people who are interested in climate agendas, but with people who are interested in continuing on with socioeconomic development, which really needs sustainability to continue. So, thinking about this scope, the board of SB with the high level climate champion, with Triple C, NFCCC, with entities that are here with us. You know, the whole ecosystem of the climate have put together a unique agenda for action. And that is new to everybody. I think most of you have been able to see it. And it's divided into 6 axes that are subdivided into 30 key objectives. And those objectives are closely related to Brazil. I will expand on that soon, but they're talking about energy industry, transportation, forestry, agriculture, food security, urban systems, water, people, cultural heritage, residue, waste. You know, Gabriela mentioned adaptation, and that is a mandate and it's an obligation of COP30 to level mitigation. As a universe, we have worsened the climate crisis. So we're not going to be able to mitigate everything alone, and we are going to have to live with this climate crisis in our life. That's what we're seeing every day. So in the agenda for climate action, we are bringing that in so that everything is leveled with the mitigation agenda. All of these themes that I mentioned are part of these axes, and there is a horizontal axis, which are the enabling factors. And that's where we're going to talk about financing, individuals, education, training, and other very important themes that will allow us to reach our goals. So within this agenda, we have a huge connection with Brazil. None of these 30 themes are far away from what we need in Brazil, and that's why Brazil saw the opportunity to host the event and take on the leadership for the event, and that's how we take a stand. We have 2 main reasons to talk about here. Number one, and it's something Gabriela mentioned, we have to be the country of solutions. We are the country of solutions. Brazil has many problems, but when we talk about climate change agenda, Brazil has tons of possibilities of solutions. That's why the world is watching us closely. We can greatly contribute to solutions, and that's something that we have as an advantage. We are very important in that theme. We have power shoring, for example. That's something that Brazil can offer to the world in great volume. We have a lot of renewable, sustainable, clean energy that is much higher than what we have to contribute as far as industry. We have to think about SAF, for example, green steel, applications for hydrogens. We can mention forests, recovery of degraded pasture lands. We are very relevant in terms of biomass, biofuels. If we think about agriculture, we also have a lot to contribute, and we are going to have all these industries there at the table. That's going to be a characteristic of COP30. We're going to open that table for many, many people. So industries that maybe were not present in previous editions will be very present now because they are very strong in Brazil, and they need to have a voice and be able to show what they're doing in terms of agriculture, mining, and many other industries and activities in Brazil. Regardless of geopolitical difficulties, regardless of logistical issues we are finding in Belém, I am sure that we're going to put together a great event that is focused on implementation, focused on the ground action. We have a lot of efforts going into the climate, as Musa mentioned, but we also need this agenda to be down to earth. We need to bring in a real life example, someone who's been successful at something, people for whom that solution makes sense, because otherwise we won't be able to implement as we need to and then scale as we need to reach the end of this decade in the best case scenario to then thrive in the following decade. I think we do have a lot of opportunity to level out the playing field and think about socioeconomic development in a more sustainable way. Of course, that means we have to think about climate action when it comes to mitigation, resilient, transition from fossil fuels, etc. Brazil is working very hard when it comes to financing. Tatiana Rosito is leading a task force in the road Baku to Belém that wants to add $1 trillion in commitments for climate initiatives. That is a Herculean task, but I'm sure that we will be able to get everything, and if not everything, most things that we need to. Then we have the TFFF, which is a facility that is very important for the preservation of tropical forests around the world. And Brazil is the biggest example of that. I think that this agenda is going to advance very well. I think COP will be fundamental for that. We are counting on entities, countries, financing bodies, and I think that the event itself will change the trajectory of what we're seeing in forests, because forests are the main asset humanity has, and we have the most underprivileged people in the world that depend on this asset as well. So we need to keep the forests standing, and we also need to find the proper adequation of society to keep the forests standing so that they can be well remunerated for it and we can organize these activities. And then we're going to talk about carbon credit. We have Baku to Belém, TFFF, and carbon credits that are also something that has been mentioned. Brazil is one of the countries that can generate the most carbon credit in the world, and it's something that the world needs. This is still in its infancy period. It is advancing in Europe, but we just passed legislation in Brazil. We still need regulation, and I hope we get it by COP30, and we need to work hard for that. This is a very fluid mechanism of taking resources where they need to go. So just to wrap up, I think we are going to positively change the path of COPs at the right time. We've done a lot in the past, and Musa gave a great example when it comes to initiatives and commitments. Of course, it's easy for us today to look back and say, hey, we're not interested in new initiatives and new commitments, because previous editions have generated ideas and commitments, right? But now that we have them, we have to look at that list. And from our side, at the high level climate champion team, we have 400 initiatives. We have to look at them and say, we are going to take them all the way. We're going to see them through and make sure that they're going to be implemented, those that are viable, scalable, and relevant. We need that so that it becomes easier for all non-governmental society that is involved to know where we're headed. This climate action agenda, I'm not sure if I mentioned, is structured so it lasts. We don't have the possibility of defining that beforehand, but countries that are members of COP accepted that very well. We presented it in Bonn in the past, and we were happy to see that people saw that we were working on the global stock take, which is an approved methodology and document that all parties agree on. And Musa just talking about recommendations. COP members told us in Bonn, you are tracing a very interesting line, because if it's about implementation and it's about the stock take that has been approved, you are going to guide negotiation. So, when you bring food for fuel and SAF, everything that's in that bottleneck, we're going to see what we need to be negotiating on. And for the implementation agenda, it would be great if we had negotiators be focused on resolving everything that's stuck in that bottleneck, including carbon credit, so that we can advance more quickly with these agendas. So, for my part, I would like to thank SBCOP. I think SBCOP is very well seen by high level champions and COP Brazil and by all parties. SBCOP has a lot of exposure right now, which is a great thing. I'm sure that it is innovative and it will make history. It will help us, be down to earth, and it will help us implement based on things that have been successful. Then we will be able to scale things more quickly. So, congratulations. Thank you for the invitation. Please count on me and the Climate Champions team. We are more than 80 people around the world who are working on this theme that you are very interested in. And our only focus is the implementation of climate action. That's why we're here. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dan, Musa, Gabriela, and Davi. We really thank you for being here for this opening session. We would like to ask you to find your seats in the audience so that we can continue on with our presentation. We would like to tell everybody that for the closing ceremony, we are going to have the online participation of the CEO of COP30, Anna Tony. We would like to invite to the stage to present CNI's main action and SBCOP's actions in Belém, Superintendent of Environment and Sustainability from CNI, Davi Bontempo. Well, good morning, everybody. We want to quickly go through this presentation so that everybody can get to know the work that has been done by CNI and also the work that we have been leaning on to make sure we can produce the best approach that we can with SBCOP in COP in Belém. So I want to show this presentation to you. I'm not sure if it's ready. Okay, so we're not going to explain what COP climate is, but I just wanted to reinforce what Dan has mentioned. It's a COP for implementation and action. That means it's an opportunity for the private sector to show its contributions. This is an agenda that we see as an agenda of opportunity to show everything that Brazil can offer, things where Brazil is competitive, where we have advantages in terms of electric matrix, the biggest producer of biofuels, a country that consumes energy but emits little CO2 in comparison to other countries. We have 20% of the world's biodiversity, 15% in the Amazon alone. So the idea is to show how we can make that become competitive edge and highlight all of those things in Belém. Here we have a quick history. Of course, CNI technically has been working since COP10 in Buenos Aires. But the idea is to show the landmarks where things changed. From the Glasgow COP and Sharm el Sheikh, we have developed a low carbon strategy that guided the stands and booths in the blue zone. We used the productive sector to show how they were contributing to transitions. In Dubai, we had a participation that was more dedicated to the productive sector. We had the participation of some industries and some companies that were working more closely together. Then in Baku, we tested another option. It was in the green zone that included a larger number of international organizations and countries. The idea here was to talk more to the international sector. that's where ideas for SB Corp started to arise. As has been mentioned, we transformed throughout 2025 and we reached Belém with the figures that we will show soon. Here, I just wanted to remind you of the strategy of CNI that has been used as our basis. I know we saw this for our opening, but basically, we talk about energy, carbon markets, circular economy, and forest conservation. Oh, okay. So we don't just work with defending interests. We do a lot of work in terms of mapping and negotiation rooms. We close with our industry base, and so we can share information with the government. That way, the government can also discuss these issues with interested parties, and we talk about trade promotion, how we promote our industry, our businesses, and our partnerships. And of course, we want to make sure we have our benchmarking and networking done properly. And that's where we came up with the idea to build an initiative to engage and mobilize the private sector.
Também a quantidade de painéis,
highlighted the number of panels and interactions with authorities. It allows for decision makers, such as ministers, members of Congress, and others, to have a more assertive interaction with the partners. And that gives us a view, an international view, helping over 30 countries who were present at the Baku COP meeting. Here we have some information about SB COP. I think the figures were already covered by Musa, but it's important to highlight that it has become an official initiative. It is together with Marrakesh partnership with UNFCCC, and it has broadening its scope over time. Here we have the governance of SB COP. Something that I would like to highlight that was not mentioned by Musa is that currently the products that are being developed here are going to contemplate 3 layers. The first layer is a lot more dedicated to the international aspect, work groups that are dealing with priorities and recommendations. We are also working on a document called Legacy that is more geared toward the domestic views of that. And the last layer is the more vocational aspect of COP. We are going to have a document more geared towards the Amazon. We have 3 deliveries plus the cases that were mentioned by Musa. The idea is for us to have a reach that is more and more expensive. When we look at the SB COP figures, we realize the advantage of having a unique positioning that can be shared by all of these institutions. This has major power. It reaches far and wide and brings the diversity that will allow us to work the best way possible, both in the agendas and the showcase agenda. So talking a little bit about our journey, in June, we had an international event in Paris. Together with the federal government, we were in Paris. We also had MEDEF, which is a sister agency in France. We have Correa do Lago, the ambassador, with the first document produced by COP. Of course, it's going to be adjusted. This was just a first draft, but the idea is to guide and to show where SB COP intends to be going. So that's connected with the topics and objectives that were already mentioned here. We were also at Bonn, international agenda that allowed us to better understand what's going to be negotiated within COP this year. Also, some promotion in the London agenda with technical debates, relevant debate. SB COP was positioning itself as one of the major players. This is the document that we are going to be sharing with you. Also, the latest version, which is available on the website, For those who want to know the priorities for SBCOP, here we have an agenda. We have São Paulo Climate Week this week, but between the 23rd and the 29th of August, we are going to have the Rio Climate Action Week. There are a lot of events that have to do with financing, climate financing, sustainable financing. That's another opportunity for SBCOP to present the way and the place that it wants to occupy. You will have access to this programming so that you can better plan and program yourselves. In September, we are going to have an event in New York Climate Week, as BCOP is going to have a main event, a meeting at Bloomberg. The 22nd is the day prior to the opening of the works by President Lula at the UN. We are going to have all of this agenda happening between the 21st and 28th of September. In October, for those of you who are still not aware, the pre-COP was going to be held in Belém between the 13th and 15th of October, but due to the coincidence of dates with Círio de Nazaré, which is a holiday, they decided to do the pre-COP at CNI and SBCOP in Brasilia. So that's when we are going to be sharing our positioning, our documentation, and we are going to kick off the work that we are going to be doing in Belém. And the dates for Belém are, as you already know, the news that we have to share with you is that we have some of the official topics out, so we are going to rethink some of our dates. In terms of negotiation, our priorities for CNI are adaptation. We talk a lot about mitigation, and adaptation is sort of left on the corner. So this is going to be one of our main priorities. This is also a priority domestically. The global stock take is also very important. This is one of the directives of the work groups. Everything that is being produced has to be taking into account GST, just transition, and the skills. And that's one of the reasons why this work group has been created. And climate financing. That is work that has to do with sovereign bonds and papers, the carbon market, everything that has been approved, and the taxonomy that's under public consultation currently. We have a calendar for side events to be held during the first week of the Belém meeting. So on the 15th, we are going to kickstart pre-COP in Brasilia. On the 9th, we have a welcome cocktail that's going to be offered by CNI FIEPA, which is the Confederation of Industries in Belém do Pará, with other partners as well. On the 10th, we will open with a networking dinner. We are going to have partners and authorities. We are going to have a more effective kickoff to the week that's going to get started. On that same day, we are also going to talk about workshops of the four work groups for SBCOP. On the 11th, we are also dealing with an additional 4 GTs or work groups. We are going to have our official opening for the CNI booth that is going to be promoting our activities throughout the 2 weeks. On the 12th, we have the major event is the corporate dialogue. This year, due to logistic issues, we are going to have it close to a blue zone area. It's going to be in a theater next to the Blue Zone COP installations, and we are going to have these dialogues then on the 12th. On the 13th, we are going to have the Business Council SBCOP corporate meeting. The last associate to come in was Nigeria, so we are going to have Musa spearheading that event. And our post-COP is going to be in December. We know it's a more complicated date where people are closing their accounts and balance sheets. So we probably will hold that in February. It's looking back at what happened, what has transpired, and what we're going to do for the next COP meeting. If you realize, on the 14th is Industry Day, so we are going to have to broaden these side events to contemplate our industry as well. It's important to emphasize that CNI made an application for the Blue Zone. We are bringing all the CNI agenda for the Brazilian industry, plus the SB Cup agenda, which is quite extensive, and a local agenda also, because we are going to be considering all cases, innovations, and everything that has to do with Pará as a state. So it's a quite complex agenda, but we have been thinking about it and designing it the best way possible to be able to encompass all of these opportunities. Just for you to have an idea of what the space, the terrain is going to be like. In the hangar here, right below it, you have the theater, the SESI Theater that I've just mentioned. On the 10th and the 11th, we are going to be holding the events at FIEP and also the meeting for the Business Council, taking advantage of the Federation of Industries facilities, trying to house the events the best way possible for SBCOP, CNI, and all our partners events, also the COP Plus journey for the Federation of Pará. Thank you very much for your attention. I don't know if some of you have seen this presentation already. It's always wonderful to see all of that, because planning is everything when we are talking COP. So this way we can enjoy to the best everything that is offered. Thank you, Davi. I will ask you to stay on the stage, and we are going to start our first panel that's going to talk about infrastructure, energy, and regenerative economy. We are going to be talk about the tripling of the efficiency, the net zero of society, and also sustainability and growth. So we have the bioeconomy group, Rodolfo Viana, deputy co-chair of bioeconomy. We have vice president, VP for legal, governmental relations and sustainability from Siemens Brazil, Luiz Felipe Gatto Mosquera. We would also like to invite Maria Emilia Perez, knowledge partner for sustainable cities. Daniela Maniki, chair of the Energy Transition Work Group. To mediate this panel, I would like to ask Davi Bontempo to start this panel. Thank you, everyone. Good morning. We have a first-rate team to talk about infrastructure, energy, and regenerative economy. This is a topic that encompasses many points. We don't talk much about infrastructure, but that is a main issue in our country, particularly in the Amazon region, where it's needed to make the economy better, to run better. And all of the panels that I've been a part to since Monday, a lot of them talked about energy. At the SEBRI event, we saw very assertive work of what has been designed for the energy industry and what is coming out for SBCOP talking about the expansion of renewable energy, energy efficiency, what is the best way for us to save energy, talking about sustainable fuels. That is very much focused on the sustainable fuels. When we talk about regenerative economy, we talk about circular economy and bioeconomy, and many even call it circular bioeconomy. That is something that has been growing a great deal and has been quite mentioned a number of times. We want to have each of your views about that, and we want to hear about the path that SBCOP is taking regarding all of this topic. So with that, I would like to call on Daniela Manique. Daniela has been developing some work with the Energy Group for Energy Transition. And I think Dani will be able to explain to us what has been done and what she has been receiving in terms of cases and what are the paths that she's envisioning, and also looking at electrification, large scale renewables, looking at the perspective from the standpoint of energy safety. So or energy security. So we need to understand if that's going to be effective or not in terms of competitiveness for our industries, for our companies. So Dani, how is it that you think about this urban aspects, about the energy aspects? Thank you, Davi. Good morning, everyone. It's an honor to be here. I'd like to thank Ricardo Mussa and CNI for the invitation to be here to talk about energy transition. We have had great discussions, very interesting discussions with companies from around the world, from every continent. Our latest paper, our latest report, which we hope we finalize by August 15th, we had a lot of KPIs, adjustments, examples that need to be included. We have three main topics. The first is energy efficiency. We understand that the best energy is energy that's not used, that's not spent. So what do we need to do? What do we need to change to consume less energy? We have a very interesting group together with Rafael looking at new technologies that consume less energy and that will require specialized labor. And the second point is about renewables, where we think about energy grid and how can we work on some of the topics that were raised by our group. We need to incentivize the use of wind power and solar energy and hydropower, but how can we combine that with the use of the energy grid without impacting or having, problems brought to, solar energy production, for example, or usage. And the third point, sustainable fuels. We have been exploring the sustainable aviation fuel, SAF, and ethanol, and how hard we need to work to promote the use and to promote the financing of these fuels. This is a major discussion that we have entertained in the group, the carbon market, and how this carbon credits can help us a great deal in advancing some of these initiatives. Having labels as we have, for example, for the energy consumption from your refrigerator, we need to know what the carbon footprint is like. Being able to be aware of this carbon footprint, having each person calculate their footprint, having the mandates starting with the calculation of this footprints. That's important, even in the most traditional industries, and we have been discussing that in the group. And even oil production could have a completely different carbon footprint that could vary a great deal. The use of KPIs. Using KPIs, disseminating that knowledge so that we can share it among different industries. We already have 130 quite solid projects in terms of energy transition. I believe by September 1st, we are going to have over 200 and some real examples also. It's going to be a major challenge to be able to pick and choose the superstars amongst all of these projects. They are all great papers, great reports. 60-70% of those come from Brazil. We have a huge participation, and there is this point that we can't deny that even though COP is a meeting that encompasses all countries in the world, Brazil is one of the chief countries. Food security is one of the aspects. Sustainable fuel is important. How are we going to be able to reconcile that with being able to feed a large portion of the world population? McKinsey has been working strongly with us as to that, looking at the sources, looking at the examples. I believe this is going to be quite a robust material that's going to show us what is possible, what is already being done with real cases and with real world data that is very much grounded, that leaves no doubt as to what we are already doing. We need to put ourselves in the role of negotiator to realize what we are going to negotiate, what we are going to suggest. So we are trying to make it something that's going to make it easy to realize what can be negotiated, what are the tools available. And we have come to that conclusion on Monday.
Thank you very much, Dani. If you haven't applied yet for cases, you can still do so by September 1st. If you would like to apply, it will be such a pleasure to receive different cases. And I want to let you know that when it comes to energy efficiency, we would like to share something, that I was reminded of when Danny mentioned refrigerators, right? When it comes to energy efficiency, there will be a highlight for that at COP30. This is a theme that doesn't require a lot of investment. We have a program called Alliance. It's a program that started in 2015. It's in its second version right now. And we're almost reaching the goal of 24 main plants. It's a great project that is well structured. We have different partners, and we have a payback that is under 1 year. If you would like to know more, you have that information available online. And if you would like to ask us about it as well, please feel free to do so. So we are always available to answer any questions. I would like to give the floor now to Marilia Emilia. She's been working at another theme that is very important, which is sustainable and resilient cities. I would like first to ask her to share her view, when it comes to this theme, the main topics, and how the work is being executed within this group. Thank you very much, Davi. First of all, it's such a pleasure to be here representing the group of Sustainable City. My partner Enrique wasn't able to be here. And I always like to explain the concept of sustainable cities. This is a topic that at first may seem that it's only from the perspective of infrastructure and construction. But as you start to delve into the topic, you can see that this is a systemic topic. It includes several industries that are players within any city. Cities are the beating hearts of most problems, where most impacts materialize. And we understand that there are many concrete solutions that we have the potential to scale. As Musa mentioned, and I think Davi as well, We have lots of interesting cases. And we see that Brazil, even though likes to think of itself as the underdog, we have been doing a lot. We have partnerships between the public and the private sector and the community. Those things are important to be highlighted. When we talk about neutral and resilient cities, that's a new way to think socioeconomic development. That's something we have to remember. For that, we have to think about climate responsibility, social justice, and financial intelligence. Danny said this, and we talked to Lou Ribeiro a lot. And Lou is always going to be mentioned here, right? But anyway, we always have to think about financing, keeping in mind sustainable new models. And the model of cities we have today face two main challenges. And we all face these challenges every day. Number one is climate emergence. We've been living through these increases in temperature, and we see the impact in simple things. We had an event in London, and we were facing extreme heat, and London is not prepared to face extreme heat. So when we look about new solutions, technology, financial aspects, there's a lot to do in the world. For us to control these climate changes, we need $5.7 trillion. It is an enormous number. I want to bring you some other figures. So 80% of global CO2 emissions are happening within cities. 56% of the world population is where? In cities. And how about in practice? What can we say? First, we talked about carbon zero. I want to bring this in a simple way, right? So we're talking about a metabolism. How can we think about urban metabolism when it comes to lots of variables that will affect each other? We have to remember that human beings are at the center of this discussion. This is an important thing to remember. Human beings are there, they feel the impact, the environment is around them. And we have to think about decarbonizing public transportation and urban mobility. If every individual spends 400 hours a year in traffic, that is a lot of time. That's a huge impact on our lives. And of course, it impacts the climate. But we have main cases of great cities like Bogota, Curitiba. Those of you who've been there, you know that public transportation there is very smart. They make very smart investments in bus lanes and subway, different solutions that are being implemented and that have great impact. We have new terms that come up, right? So we're using a retrofit for new buildings. We're looking at that from the perspective of clean energy, thinking about how to bring energy efficiency to new buildings and construction. Buildings also include a lot of critical minerals to be built. So the more we can use existing structures for new ones, the better we can do. In Sao Paulo, we have certification given to public and private buildings that will reward efficient use of waste and retrofit material. We also have a lot of energy from renewable sources that are being put into buildings. In sustainable cities, my department, we have more than 20 members. We have more than 11 countries involved. So it's important to say that we have a lot of things that can be scaled to the world and to a bigger part of Brazil. Another important thing about carbon zero is the integration of different sources of renewable energy. As I keep talking to you, you will see how much sustainable cities is a theme that is impacted by all different topics that we work on within SBCOP. We have the city of Freiburg in Germany. It has distributed solar panels throughout the whole city. They are everywhere and they are there thanks to investments that made that happen. We're also talking about nature-based solutions and new materials. In circular economy and materials, we also talk about how to develop new materials when it comes to asphalts, structures for different buildings, all that need to be rethought. And we have a lot of NBS or nature based solutions for that. And Brazil has a lot to offer. I would like to bring in an example from Amsterdam. We have similar projects to that in Brazil, and they have urban projects for reforestation and carbon capture. This is something that we can use as well. Okay, now let me change gears and talk about another topic here, right? And again, let's look at this from the perspective of the solution that can have an impact. We can adapt, resist, and recover from the shocks and stresses that we have felt. Resilience means draining systems, urban planning, where we can avoid occupying areas of risk. We see the impact in terms of cost and infrastructure to reallocate these families. We talk about healthcare networks that can protect the most vulnerable portions of the population. And we talk about agile governance and technology to respond to crises. We're talking about neutrality and resilience, and they need to walk hand in hand. They cannot happen in isolation from each other. We need neutral and efficient cities. If we don't work on resilience, the impact is going to be huge. And finally, we talk about how to accelerate. You know, Lou is always there talking about this. We need to work on financing and long term capital. We tend to think short term. In the private sector, I often say that we have a short term vision, a year on year vision, but we need to think long term. We need to attract international capital, and we need to also recognize the value and the impact of these initiatives, not just from a financial point of view, also from a financial point of view, but we have to include social and environmental factors. We need urban governance that can bring the public sector and companies and the society to the discussion with integrated solutions where civil society can help build solutions. We have great cases that prove that and that are happening everywhere. We need data, we need evidence, we need figures to guide us and to help us measure the effectiveness of measures so that we can work on a sustainable, resilient future where our individuals, our population can have a place that has social and sustainable development. Thank you very much, Maria Emilia. It's also important to highlight that this group she's a part of, called Resilient and Sustainable Cities, is here to bring in the vision of adaptation. The groups are very well engaged in mitigation, but the groups of sustainable cities is where we saw we could really work on sanitation agendas, and those are things that Amelia mentioned well. Yes, we have cases in the city of in the state of Pará as well. We are responsible for the legacy report in the Amazon, and that's an important thing. I apologize for interrupting. We have great cases in the Amazon. I think we mentioned this on Monday. We talked about Aegea and sanitation that impacts on 600 direct and indirect jobs. We have the company iFoods that is also a partner there. Great. I would like to invite Mosquera to join the conversation. He's a partner of CNI, and he's going to talk about taxonomy with us now. This is a theme that is being discussed at the federal level, and it brings in the idea of indicators, carbon per product. It's a work that we've been conducting with hard to abate industries. This is work that needs to understand the realities of Brazil. I remember that when we were discussing the international norm of ISO, and countries were thinking about business models and management models when it came to indicators and data. In Brazil, we still have to deal with problems from this century and last century, and that includes sanitation, which is a challenge for cities. We are still looking at some waste management issues. We look at some solutions that are used in the cement industry too. But I would like to hear from Gato Mosquera, I would, so that we can add value to task forces. Well, thank you, David. Thank you, CNI, for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here and talk about taxonomy. So, first of all, I want to talk about from the perspective of the community. You know, as individuals and companies, we have social responsibilities, and then I want to bring in the company and business perspective. From a personal standpoint, circularity is key, and we have to work towards that goal. We've been following a linear model of economy that is not sustainable in the long run. We extract resources from the planet, and we don't have any guarantees that this is sustainable, and we know that this is not sustainable. So it's a problem for the next generations. Of course, this is a very important thing. From the business perspective, taxonomy for circularity is essential. It is part of a bigger plan, which is taxonomy in general. And for companies that are at the forefront of sustainability, that's a huge deal. And it offers a competitive edge. It's something that gives us an advantage and guarantees that we're going to have a level playing field when we look at competition. Because if there is a harmonization of concepts and nomenclature, then reports will be reporting the actual facts. We're not going to be feeling like we're going to be competing with someone who is masking information and is greenwashing their numbers. I think we are quite advanced in Brazil, and we are trying to lead this journey. When it comes to resource management, I will later mention designing and the change in paradigm. But I want to comment on something Maria Emilia said. You know, when we talk about smart cities, we often misuse public transportation and resources that we have. We have a lot of people using individual transportations, and we're losing 400 hours a year in traffic. But hey, if they live in the outskirts of Sao Paulo, that's going to increase by a lot. So we have to think about how we're using those resources. This is homework that we have to do, and it's something that we have to bring to our supply chain. Earlier, we talked about small and medium sized companies. I'm a lawyer, and I've worked with compliance and law my whole life. 20 years ago, we talked about raising awareness for small and medium sized companies when it came to compliance. But now the name of the game is sustainability. We need to take that information to small and medium companies that may not have access to the information that we do. Talking about taxonomy for circularity now, I see very positive points for the industry. As I mentioned, we know that we will be leveling the playing field, that it will be a clean game and people will be using the same references. That gives us an advantage for us in research and development, in cost reduction, in the attraction of investments, and without a doubt, our corporate reputation. When it comes to research and development, when we have clear criteria about circularity, we can then direct our resources to R&D, and that will give us more returns. And more returns means more efficiency because we're going to have lower costs. Circularity is about efficiency, and efficiency is cost. If you have lower costs, you have a better position. When it comes to attracting investments, there is a conflation of green resources and renewable resources that are waiting for companies that have the sustainability posture. You are going to be opening your company doors to financing and more competitive costs. That, of course, will improve your corporate reputation. Companies that are embracing sustainability have a corporate image that is more positive. They can better engage their clients. They show NPS results that are better than those that don't. And you have a more engaged labor force, a workforce. We know that Gen Zs are working towards a purpose. When you have clear purpose and you have work power that is more engaged, those are things that will give you an ROI, no doubt. But what do we have to do in order to accelerate this transition? What do we need to do to engage our supply chain? And what do we do to engage small and medium companies? Well, we have to show how important this is, and we have to have a paradigm shift. And that can be when we think about the design of our products or our business model. When we talk about designs, we used to think and plan and sell a product, and then we would think about how it could be recycled. Once that was thrown out, that's when we were going to think about recycling. But it's different now. Now, when you're designing a product, you have to think about the elements, the raw material that will be used to make this product, because that's how you're going to guarantee circularity. All of those things have to be thought before everything happens. Those are things that help us maximize the use of every resource that we have. And when we talk about business models, we see that we are going through a transition. We're leaving the regular buying and selling process to more intelligent models. We talk about shared use now. We're talking about software as a service. We're talking about subscription models. I like to use the example of power drills, which is what we use to hang a picture. I'm sure all of you have a domestic power drill that you bought years ago. It's probably in your garage. And how often do you actually need a power drill at home, right? Hardly ever. So is that the best strategy, the best place to spend our money? Shouldn't we perhaps have rented a power drill when we needed one? Those are points that we have to reflect on to really engage with our supply chain. Brazil has a unique position. We've been rethinking supply chain since the COVID crisis. We are now going through this crazy moment, but we have a lot of potential. We just need to roll up our sleeves and embrace circularity. I'm sure that will give us an advantage.
Vários conceitos, de modelo.
Perfect, Mascara. You give us great ideas. You talk about eco-design and the contribution of a circular economy, not only in terms of emissions, but the best use of natural resources. Now, going to our last lecture, Rodolfo. Rodolfo is part of the bioeconomy work group. We always discuss the bioeconomy concept, how we're going to reward this biological segment, looking at some specific industry segments, but thinking about his vision, how can we propose and build some models thinking about post-consumption and ecological regeneration? Thank you, CNI colleagues, for this invitation. It's a pleasure to be here representing Priscila Câmara, one of the chairmen of this group who was unable to be here. She's in Argentina right now, talking a little bit about what we have been doing in the bioeconomy group. We understand this concept to be a model that's going to allow us a more sustainable way of using fossil resources. That's going to allow us to use biological, renewable resources to start taking the path of a linear economy, leaving a linear economy, going into a circular economy, going from extractivism to regenerativism. So that's what we want to see in the future. That's what we need to fight the effects of climate change. Of the 700 cases that Musa mentioned, we have always had a 10% ratio. We have around 70 cases that show clear examples of how bioeconomy can drive everything and is already driving. And there are two factors that are always mentioned and that have been mentioned here today: scalability and acceleration. We have several examples that will make you fall in love with them, but they are isolated cases. So it doesn't matter if we are talking about 700 cases, they are cases because they are not mainstream yet. We need to scale those cases. We need to accelerate because, we're talking about climate emergency right now. And in the group, I've identified 4 pillars. We have identified 4 ways of working to make these cases scalable and accelerated. The first two have to do with supply. We're talking about production and technology. The third is going to talk about demand, the other and the fourth, capital. So once again, Luciana's name is going to be here, but we are always, in need of, the coin, the actual pinching of pennies. So we are talking about assets in general. We are drawing a parallel with other groups. When we talk about energy, you need to shift from the model that we are currently using, particularly here in Brazil, but we are always talking about renewable assets and how can we unlock that. That's another element that we have in common with other group. We are talking about green skills, abilities, training. We are talking about biological assets and the original peoples that are going to allow us to implement these models and to unlock this biological production. Currently at BASF, and I am bringing that as an example because it's very familiar with me. We have some biological assets that started in Morocco with argan oil exploration and exploitation, the development of technologies and other things that were traditional in some parts of the world, but in some development countries were still not put into practice. And when you do all of that, you allow a more sustainable chain, and we were able to develop assets within those chains that are traceable, sustainable, with shared values with these communities. And the project in Morocco was the seedling for other projects in Vietnam with a fruit that's called rambutan, similar to the lychee, for example, that allowed us to skill up those communities, an increase in productivity of 57% in the average of all the communities that were trained, an increase on income of around 20% for these communities. So we're talking about a new model that is about competitiveness and productivity. We are not talking only about the sustainable aspect. We are talking about circular economy, the economic side of it. If you don't have the economic side of it, the circularity is not going to work. So, the economic side is important for this type of path. Another example of these chains in other countries are abundant. Also, we have communities in the Amazon that are developing assets with the Amazon biodiversity using that is being escalated by BASF and other agencies. So, we have to make that the COP of interaction, scaling up things that could be implemented elsewhere. Also, we have the side of technology. We already have some capabilities, some abilities, but we need to have more. We have a gap between the North and the South of the globe. We need to work at patents according to the International Organization of Patents and Intellectual Property. A great number of patents are 5% only come from developing countries. So once you develop these patents, you're also talking about enjoying the benefits, reaping the benefits of that. And the third pillar talks about how we are going to develop the demand, because if you don't have offtakes, if you don't have demand, you're not going to be able to push for production and to leverage production. And as Rizzi said, we're talking about the taxonomy, the regulation, public policy, and it's important to create this regulatory environment that's going to allow investments to come in. We need to have a flow of investment. When we talk about energy, we have a high capex, a long payback. If you don't have legal safety, regulation, if you don't have subsidies, I mean, we can't fund activities that are not sustainable, leaving aside activities that could represent our future and that are not going to be financed. So, and then we come to the fourth. So, how we are going to fund everything, to finance everything? Our experience in the Amazon, how can we unlock resources? We are thinking about amounts such as 5-digit investments for developing oakberry or acai berry production, or Tucumã meatballs. They can't develop, for example, cereals for the morning with biomass fibers because oftentimes they don't have minimal resources and they are not able to structure a loan with the banks because they are already too leveraged. So, you know, in the COP meeting, we are going to be able to bring all of the examples, making people think about bioeconomy as a means of transformation for society. How can we transform society through energy transition, through the transition to a circular economy, a bioeconomy, making this COP meeting, as Mr. Correa do Lago, the ambassador, says, the COP that is going to be the turning point for everything. Okay, I thought that we were going to talk about the financing, but the next panel is going to be with Lu. So she's going to satiate our curiosity. Yes, she's going to be talking about financing. She's going to talk a lot about the carbon market. Brazil has a huge potential in the carbon market. It's really incredible, and that is always permeating through all the groups, and we need to talk about that. Well, so we are closing our panel, and we are now giving it to our Master of Ceremonies, our MC. Thank you, David, for mediating this panel. Thank you, all the participants. Now for our second panel that is also focusing on the work groups for COP, talking about nature, finance, and just transition. We are going to talk about two subjects, nature and foodstuffs and the transition of finance, green jobs, and capacitation for the new economy. So we would like to invite Miguel Moraes, Deputy Chair for Nature-Based Solutions, Daniela Carbinato, Knowledge Partner for Food Systems Work Group, Luciana Ribeiro, Chair for the Finance Work Group, Juliano Grebler from the Green Skills Work Group. And to mediate this panel, we'll have SB COP Chair Ricardo Mussa. Thank you all for participating. I'm going to need to interrupt the panel for 5 minutes. You talked a lot about Luciana Ribeiro. Luciana has a history working ever since B20 meetings. And she told me, Mussa, I don't want to do academic work anymore. I want to have a hands-on kind of approach. So I want to see what's happening. I want to hear about the financing discussions. Well, to everyone who was talking about financing, we have had a lot of great discussions with the groups, everything that's happening from the geopolitical standpoint. The big question is, do we have the right mood for climate financing? We are very much involved. And when we talk with journalists, I would like to remind us of some data. Sometimes we think that climate is not in the agenda, but climate is not something that can be dictated by regulations or decrees. Last year, $340 billion were spent due to climate extremes, of which only 140 billion were insured. So the fact that we are spending due to climate issues is a truth that's going to happen through investment or that is going to happen through insurance due to the loss of assets due to climate. We are going to have to live with that somehow. You know, there are indemnifications that need to be made. So oftentimes in practice, the projects exist, but when it comes to finance, it can't move forward. And what our group has been trying to do is try to identify what are the bottlenecks. What is the difficulty? I don't like this word, but you know we have to think about the transactions. We need to take this business, these transactions off the paper. Uh, in the end, private capital is only going to join if there is a financial gain to be had. So it's not that we are going to be able to solve every single problem, but at least, you know, some of the major ones. And the first point, the very first strong point is that we have many different players with different types of capital. As you know, private capital needs profit. You also have the philanthropic development bank, multilateral negotiations capital. But for some reason, even though this capital exists, they are not accessing these projects. So, what were the main hurdles? The first main hurdle, I believe, is linked to FX. Many of the available resources are only available in dollars. And for developing countries who have or suffer from FX volatility, it's very hard to take a loan in dollars or to have any kind of equity attraction when you are dealing with dollars. So, as a matter of fact, we are developing transactions with the Inter-American Development Bank, the IDB, with the IFC, with the Brazilian Treasury, transactions both in terms of debt and equity that try to offset this unbalance of the FX risk that's brought in by the FX risk. Also, there are many interesting projects that oftentimes do not have an off-taker. The project is cool, the project is great, but the financial entity is not able to income to the project because they are not sure if the plant-based meatballs are actually going to sell. So, you know, these are bioeconomic issues, but also could be something more complicated, like, you know, maritime fuel. We have an advantage from the standpoint of biofuels, and it would be an advantage for us to talk about sustainable maritime fuels, but we have to be sure that someone is going to be buying it. And ever since we were talking about raising, you need to be sure that you're going to have the supply that is going to offset the demand. So if we have many people who are buying on the one side and many people who are offering on the other hand, you have to think about the capital. What capital is willing to take risk in dollars or that is willing to take risk in different ways or that is willing to lose some money to take some projects and make them a reality, take them off paper. So we have to create moments for dialogue. Patricia has been fundamental in these discussions. Arthur from BCG also. So we have been talking a lot about sustainable aviation fuel, sustainable maritime fuel, having these conversations in the bioeconomy realm to try and bring all those players together and make progress. You know, the guy who is manufacturing the plant-based meatballs needs to go after financing, and credit instruments are complicated. Sometimes we don't look at the value chain to see where the difficulties lie. We think about creating really cool financial instruments, but we need to see how this chain is behaving so that the meatball guy doesn't need to be concerned, or have something like Faciris that is going to bring all the instruments based on the mandate. So this is an important effort, and it's been quite interesting because even though our group is group of finance, many of the participants of our group are not finance, and we were able to foster a dialogue between these two sides, the finance side and the non-finance side. What is missing for the financing? The financing segment wants to have profit. If it's too difficult, they're not going to come in. So we were able to start this dialogue. It is a uh, tough job, but we also need to talk a little bit about what's going to happen post-COP meeting, because by November 2025, things are not going to be done. We have to think about how we are going to take these discussions forward. And Musa has been greatly supporting this idea, creating a transaction hub that is going to take it further to November 26 to be able to still create these transactions, bringing the players to the table, still trying to foster all of that. Yes, this is one of the most active groups in creating something real, thinking about real issues. These are really in-depth discussions. Thank you for your work, Musa. It's been my pleasure. And I don't know if you all were able to see it, but The Economist, the magazine, talks about Greenlash. It's the cover story. And they talk about the climate and themes that are related to climate. And it's a good provocation. We can't deny the reality of fact. I think the provocation of SB Cop of bringing cases is very good in that sense. We need to be pragmatic. We can continue to be idealistic. We need to be actual and implement things. We need to bring people from different points of view to reconcile.
Thank you very much, Lou. I just want to quickly interrupt us. We have a message from someone that was not able to be with us. It's Anna. So, Anna, if you could join us online, welcome. Thank you so much, Anna, for making the time. I see you are everywhere. You may have a twin sister, I'm not sure, but you're everywhere all at once. So, Anna, could you say a few words? Thank you so much, Musa, for having invited me, because it makes me very happy to participate. I am so glad to see the size of SB Cop, how much you are mobilizing the private sector and the different work groups. Everyone is working hard, and Lou even mentioned a couple of words that I had written down to mention about the meetings that we're going to have. They're going to happen in Sao Paulo during their climate week, and the words are pragmatism and the politics of what's possible. Those are very important. International conventions are feel like they're up here and they never reach the population. But they do reach the population when we start to make products in a sustainable way. When we start to look at the value chain and see how that is going to affect the day-to-day of workers and of individuals. And I think SB Cop is doing an amazing job. You know, cops are not silver bullets. As Lou just mentioned, the world is not going to be over, and we're not going to be done in November 2026. My job there will be done, right? But cops are places where we can go to debate what we have to debate, which is the involvement of the private sector when it comes to helping the acceleration of climate actions. SBCOP has been doing exactly that. You're asking the correct questions, and more importantly, you're bringing in the right solutions. You're thinking about how we can pragmatically accelerate climate actions in the whole value chain, looking at the financial sector, the productive sector, talking to public houses, public bodies, talking to the population, consumers, etc. The transaction is inevitable. The current geopolitical scenario is tough, but we know, and private companies know, that thinking long term is important. We know that the transition is going to happen, and we need to be ready to solve the problem. If we don't make the choices in the short term, then we're going to have to react to catastrophes in the future. So it's better for us to make the right choice pragmatically and using the best knowledge that we have. So I want to thank for the invitation. I want to thank SBCOP for the job that you're doing, especially you, Musa. Thank you so much. Well, thank you, Anna. I know you have a lot to do, so thank you for making the time to be here. Anna has been very supportive. I talked to her 5, 6 times. She was with me during the opening. So again, Anna, thank you so much for all the work you've been doing. So let's talk more about solutions and less about problems. We're here for you. Thank you. All right, so moving on, I'm just gonna, mention that we're 30 minutes behind. So I just want us to be as brief as possible. Now, Juliana, I want to talk to you about a cross-sectional topic. I was very involved with energy transitions, and I I confess that I wasn't paying enough attention to this theme. Rafa from Schneider is a very competent person. Schneider is an amazing company, and I've been very impressed with your work. So, Giuliano, could you tell us a little bit about the challenges you faced and how the work has been happening? I was with some press, and they also want to know. Could you just tell us a few words and let us know what could we expect from what you're preparing? Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Ricardo. Rafael has been leading the work and doing amazing work at Schneider. And I want to thank the work of consulting companies that have been amazing. They've been developing great materials. When we talk about green works and green skills, it's not rocket science, but it's complicated. There are many players involved that have to help us meet our objectives. We look for scalability, but we also need to understand the territory, the culture that we're going into, and we have to find a solution that makes sense. The main challenges that we have found, and everyone's mentioned this, is about financing. But when it comes to education and training, it's not just about more money, it's about well placed money. We need to direct funds where the greatest needs are. We have great programs for trade schools that have scholarship programs for Brazilian citizens and other citizens, but maybe we should be directing that to more green jobs. We know that by 2030, we will have more than 30 million jobs being created in the green economy. So the demand is there. The funds that we're using for training have to take that future into account. It's not just about companies allocating funds to that, but also people will see that that's going to be a good field to explore in the future when it comes to making the money that they need. In Brazil, we have population that doesn't have the money to pay for this type of training and reskilling. So we need to understand where we need these people, where these people are, and how to help them study to become proficient in these jobs. When it comes to financing, I think that's it. The Brazilian labor market is very informal. We have a gig economy that needs to be well studied and then will help us find where these workers are, where the workforce is. And then we need to see what kind of skills are lacking. And we need to then teach these skills to requalify people. So these are the challenges. We are proposing that we need to integrate this informal job market. So we think about how to bring in this demand and we include people from the gig economy in the formal workforce. These people have practical knowledge that we often overlook. So all they need is reskilling. And we need to know how to direct investments to places where we will find the results that we need. We are a country that is very big and that has very different contexts and scenarios. We need to zoom out and look at the whole country. And if we're able to do that, then it's easier to extrapolate that to the rest of the world because we will know how to go deeper into each reality. When we look at the more than 40 cases that have been presented, we see great topics. We look at instruction, education, and behavioral factors. There are several cases that are very one-off and that can be scaled. So it's about understanding the reality, about understanding formal and informal workforces, and again, to retrain workers that are part of the workforce. Interesting. I think you found a great link with my entity, which is Senai. We know that all around the world, people are talking about reskilling of the workforce. SBCOP will bring in a link to talk about how you can spread this through different organizations. Now, Dani, I want to go back to you and also talk to Miguel. Let's talk about NBS's nature-based solutions. People talk about the carbon market, it's very in vogue. But we saw a lot of people criticizing the standardization of this market. We had problems with Red Plus in the past. So, what solutions do you see? Of course, people agree that standing forests are a project that need to be valued. But I'm curious to know, what are you going to suggest to unlock this market that we all agree that is very important? Thank you very much, Musa. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Miguel Moraes. I'm Deputy Chair for NBSs, and I work with forest preservation. I think NBSs include a lot of interventions, green infrastructure, restoration projects, and not all of those can be made viable through the carbon market. This is clear, but it's important to be reiterated. We have projects that can be viabilized by carbon market, but they depend on global standards that are recognized and accepted by government, by investors, and by the market in general. We know that these industries have different vantage points. Governments want to consolidate regulations, nationally speaking and then locally speaking. Investors want to decrease risk, potentialize their ROIs. They are worried about guarantees, predictability. Markets want to multiply transactions to gain more scale, and they want to do it yesterday, right? So everyone is looking at this from their own vantage point. That's normal. But if we're using everybody's different yardstick to try to measure different impacts, to try to certify these projects that are so different, we are going to end up getting lost along the way. We can't have different yardsticks here. So this is an important point. It will be hard to integrate NBSs to carbon markets if we have different yardsticks. So before I mention what we still need to have to find this global standard, I want to quickly talk about what we already have. Because we have a framework, scientifically speaking, that is very well consolidated. We understand causes and effects that impact those assets. We have the technology, we have innovation, we have more and more tools to measure impacts, to communicate those impacts. We have control institutions that can control and regulate the transition of these assets. So we have things on the table that we can use and we can start from them. So now let's go to what we're missing. There are three things we've been talking about. The first one is that the standardization discussion has to focus on a process and has to be anchored on principles. If we're just talking about methods and procedures, we get lost. We have a lot of R&D that is very quick, and so methods become obsolete, and so do tools. So we need to be anchored on principles. Number two, we need to put energy into strengthening the chain, the value chain, the supply chain. We have an asymmetry that poses a challenge. We don't have the same circumstances in all countries and regions and cities. Sometimes you do or don't have access to some tools or technology or even qualified labor. And then the result of that is chaos. There's no standardization. Sometimes it's hard to find a verification agency in South America that is qualified to conduct the work or that has access to biodata. In Brazil, we have a lot of biodata, but that's not true of every country. So how can we turn that into a global standard? And lastly, we have to ensure interoperability between systems. If platforms of credit registry and inventory, etc., cannot communicate with each other, it's going to be hard. We're going to always have volunteer markets as a whole other universe. We're going to end up with different quality standards, payment standards, and that's going to be hard for developers and players in the market when it comes to responding to demands coming from everywhere. So I wanted to reiterate the fact that there is no consensus without trust. To have institutional trust, everyone has to be at the table. That's very important. Yeah, wow, I really agree with you. I think the NBS work is one of the most technical. There's a lot of detail, and I know Daniela is part of both as well. I've been learning a lot, and I hope that by COP we're able to train a lot of people and we're able to trust the market again. Danny, you've been tasked with wrapping this up. Dani is our multitasker. And one of her tasks is to give me feedback, and she gives harsh feedback. And I just want to acknowledge your work here in public. So thank you for the work that you do. So, Dani, you are leading an advanced group. You have people from JBS, from Nestle, Ministry of Livestock and Agriculture from Nigeria. It's a very strong group that came from G20. And I think my expectation is to hear you talk about this. Okay, so please let us know how the work is happening, what challenges you've been facing. I have high expectations. Wonderful. Thank you very much, Musa. And I am sorry for the harsh feedbacks, but I'm happy to be here representing this group that, as Musa mentioned, has been forming since G20. We have added other organizations to the group. We have more than 30 companies that are part of it currently, and we're working to elaborate recommendations to support and pinpoint paths to negotiation and also working in the action agenda. I want to start by acknowledging the size of the challenge, and I'm glad that your expectations are high because food systems are one of the most strategic industries when it comes to adaptation and mitigation for the climate, but also just transition. Food systems have to fulfill three big roles. Number one, healthy diets for everybody. Number two, dignified means of living when it comes to generating benefits to society. And number three, to contribute to adaptation and mitigation for the climate. What we were working on B20 and are still working on is a sector that has different paradoxes. We have, on the one hand, advanced a lot, but on the other hand, we have structural challenges. I want to tell you a little bit about those because that is associated to the power that this sector has. When it comes to healthy diets, today we are able to feed 10 billion people, which is more than the world population. On the other hand, we have 2.3 billion people without food security and 10 billion that are facing obesity. So, a third of people in the world have some sort of food security issue. The industry encompasses 10% of the global GDP and 30% of the workforce. However, two-thirds of adults that are living in poverty are living from agriculture. 70% of child labor is happening in the agricultural industry. And the climate is responsible, in terms of the climate, it is responsible for 25% of emissions, in addition to the use of soil and forest degradation.
Lei, se de lado ele tem essas contradições e esses paradoxos, ele também carrega.
If on the one hand we are dealing with these paradoxes, on the other hand, we are changing the story and contributing to just climate transition. There is no other way of providing food to all of the people that we know of, and given the scope of this industry should include millions of workers contributing disproportionately to the economic development of some nations. The least developed economies, silviculture, agriculture, and cattle raising contribute 35% to their economy. So when we talk about just transition, that's something very, very important. Something that we have been discussing greatly in the group ever since the B20 is that without productivity in the fields, we are not going to be able to complete this journey. So, our idea with the UN is that we need an increase of 28% in production in order to be in alignment with the Paris Agreement and to get this productivity off the ground in real life. It's very complex, but it's something that can't be escaped. Without that, we are not going to promote just transition, and we are not going to be able to mitigate or do what we need to do to live with climate change. IPCC estimates that 20 to 40% of the mitigation and climate adaptation will come from food systems, which includes the use of land and the recovery of degraded land. And I believe that it comes together with what we have been developing in the group. If you think about that industry, if you think about that segment, it's impossible to think about the segment's progress advancing towards justice and without thinking of that in terms of the environment, the importance of our convergence in terms of a framework that will align our understanding of what regenerative agriculture is all about, what are the goals when we are looking at those techniques, forestry systems, when we are thinking about crops and forests, how can we converge all of that to bring that into alignment with public policy? And then how can we unlock productivity? We have been discussing innovation and R&D in the field, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about the cases, but we have to structure the production chains. We have a lot of technology. We have one of the most developed agricultures worldwide, but that's not necessarily the reality for developing countries or family-based agriculture. So the link between what's happening in the field and what's happening in the markets, what's happening in Africa, for example, is the hidden middle, those agents that make the bridge between the field and the market is an issue, and the waste is problematic, and none of that is going to be captured by consumers or organizations. I'm always surprised at that number, but there is 600 million farms around the world. Less than 2% are family owned. So without changing that, we are not going to be able to change agriculture or do just transition or climate change. And in closing, we have different estimates of how much is needed, but the levels are always very high, regardless of the estimation. Without the commercial capital, private capital, this transition will be impossible. So we'll need to innovate from the standpoint of financial instruments. We will need a blended capital, commercial capital needs to be invited to invest in different projects, be it in terms of debt or equity, coordinating that with the different formats. And concession capital is going to be very important also. So we have received around 60 to 70 cases. And to my surprise, I was quite optimistic after I looked at all those cases, because when we look at that, we have practical evidence, measurable evidence of agricultural techniques that can adopt regenerative techniques, promoting environmental improvements, and have a growth in productivity and in profitability. And we're not talking about one case here. We have different cases throughout different crops, different geographies, different land structures. They are all pointing towards a very positive path. So we are very optimistic that by cooperating in public policy, being able to make strides, the private market is being able to mobilize itself and get some projects off the ground with very positive results. So we are looking at the green revolution. We are looking at this green revolution without the trade-offs that we needed to do in the past in terms of without the trade-offs like, inclusion and environment and all of that. So ending with your optimism, Daniela, I know that we are running into lunchtime, so I'm going to be closing the panel in a very optimistic note that you brought, right, Daniela? We now have a very great team, 300, nearly 400 companies discussing on the SB COP. We have 8 consultancy companies working with us, everybody working pro bono. We are going to have a great COP meeting. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you, Musa, for your participation. And once again, we would like to thank everyone for participating in the SB COP meeting, Strategic Solutions for the Productive Industry. And I would like to invite you all to brunch. Have a great afternoon, all of you.